Welcome back, everyone. This is Axomm from Fire Emblem on another episode of the series Criminally Underrated. Today, I'm here with Raisins once again.
Oh, hello. Yes, me. That's my cue to go in. I love that series name, Criminally Underrated. I think last episode, we suggested Trial by Combat, and I was like, that's pretty good because of the whole back and forth nature of it. I was only halfway in love with it, right? I was like, it's there, but it needs the extra spice. But I think Criminally Underrated is even better.
This very much encompasses what we're trying to do here, talking about these criminally underrated units in the Fire Emblem series. And today, the most underrated units in Fire Emblem Three Houses.
That's right. These are our personal opinions on the subject, right? They're informed by the whole underrated aspect. Obviously, we need to be talking to people and understanding the meta of Fire Emblem Three Houses. So part of it is informed on our gameplay experience with Fire Emblem Three Houses, our own evaluations of the unit, but then, of course, contrasting that to the meta-analysis and the character analysis that we usually see online when people talk about this game. So that's what we're comparing these units to when we say that they are underrated. And I think each of us has brought one unit to the table, and we're going to state our case. The other person is going to form their rebuttal, and that's basically how it goes down.
And at the end, you guys as the viewers are going to decide who is the most criminally underrated unit in Three Houses. Since last time I began, I think it's only fair that this time you begin.
What I think is the most underrated unit in Fire Emblem Three Houses, Catherine. Before I really go in, I know some of you are probably scratching your heads Catherine, how can she be underrated? I know this was your first reaction when we shared the units with each other beforehand so that we could think about it privately. But when I first brought up Catherine, Axomm, you were like, what did you say?
Are we thinking about the same Catherine? Is there another Catherine in the game?
How can she be underrated because she's so good? My point is, however good you think Catherine is, I think she's way better than that. I would very easily put her as a top one non-lord in the game. In a sort of break we were taking, I was actually thinking about which units would I actually put above Catherine? And it's probably Edelgard, because Raging Storm is pretty sweet, okay? Probably Dimitri I'd put above Catherine, because Bat Wrath, Bat Bandage is pretty good. And then it's I'm actually scratching my head, is anyone else actually better than her? I think I actually feel pretty comfortable putting her even above Byleth, even above Quad. Even above other units like Lysithea, or some people bring up Seteth or whatever, or some people bring up Bernadetta. I feel actually pretty confident putting Catherine up there. Advantages and the leads that she has are so outrageously good. Kind of speaking to the underratedness aspect, I do know that people are very enamored with Catherine. It was a very popular piece of advice back in the day for maddening that you really ought to recruit Catherine early. But I think it was always, with the advice that Catherine was good, there was always layered underneath it the sort of subtext, or even just outright spoken but she's not everything. She has some downsides. I've heard a lot of things Catherine falls off, she's the Jagan. My pitch for her being underrated is allaying these criticisms one by one, because I really think they're all just rubbish.
The Jagan thing, that's 100% how I think people perceived her. They were whoa, she's really good in the beginning, but she falls off. And it's but does she though? Does she really?
Does she? My Catherine pitch is going to have two parts. First, I'm going to talk about her advantages. Then I'm going to talk about her so-called downsides, right? And I'm really air quoting here. Her combat arts are really bad, so she scales poorly into maddening late game. The best thing to do with Catherine is take her Thunderbrand and then bench her, which is really, come on. I do see very oftentimes suggested a lot of builds for Catherine and these are builds that are presented as totally genuine, good ways to play her that are just completely not playing into her strengths, and I can tell they're misevaluating her as a unit. I very often see Sniper Catherine. It gives her a brave combat art, it uses her crest, but I think you're just totally missing the point that Catherine doesn't need any of that stuff. Let's get into why I think Catherine is so good. The primary reason is entirely the Chapter 4 recruitment. If you pick her up in Chapter 4, which is not really that difficult, she joins as a level 7 Swordmaster. She has A-rank swords, I think it's C+ rank gauntlets, and D rank authority. But really, it's mostly in the strength, the speed, and the defense. These stats are outrageous. They are insane. Let me put this into perspective, just how high these Chapter 4 stats are. If you have Swordmaster Catherine immediately recruited at level 7, and you are playing 100% growths on all of your other units, so all of your other units are also level 7, and they have gotten literally perfect level ups. There are 3 units in the game who can beat her in 1 stat. Yeah.
Those are wild bases.
So that means all the other students in the game, all like 30 of them, are always, every single time, going to be worse than Catherine. And like, here's the thing, obviously you don't have 100% growths. Like, you're getting points here, you're getting points there. So she's just going to be leagues ahead of everybody else when she joins. It's insane, the stat differential that they have. This pretty much is the crux of the matter. She starts so far ahead. Her growths aren't even that bad, by the way. But it's just she has such a massive start that she stays ahead all game long. What are the criticisms against that? Because I can say, well, she has a massive lead over everybody in strength and in speed and in defense and in HP. She has such a massive lead over everybody. This is a very common criticism brought against Catherine, is that her combat arts are bad. Like, as though this is really needed on maddening. Okay, so let's take a unit like Sylvain, right? And maybe like, oh, well, Catherine doesn't have Tempest Lance and Sylvain does. But if Catherine just attacks with an Iron Sword, she has 29. So like this unit, like people are like, oh, Sylvain's great, he can Tempest Lance people. Okay, Catherine just does it. Like, what I want to point out is that everyone else is using combat arts to get to where Catherine just is, right?
It's the pre-promote curse, man. You're suffering from success.
What's another point people very commonly bring against Catherine? They're like, well, she's not really that good. She auto levels brawling. It's like, oh, this is a wasted boon. Okay,
as if having brave weapons on demand with low like weight is bad in any
is
situation.
Bad.
Yeah.
Okay,
go on.
And like, okay, she can't access the class with Fist Fair. But what does Fist Fair do? It gives you +5 damage with your gauntlets, and she just has 5 strength more than the dudes. So like, she just has it anyway. Who cares? The last common thing that people bring against her is like bad weapon ranks for like inability to start into advanced classes, right? So here's the thing. She has an easier time getting into advanced classes than basically everyone else, because everyone else has to reach level 20. She just has to be recruited. Has everything that you would want from beginning an advanced class. Even if you think Swordmaster is not a very good advanced class, she has 13 levels and no Banes to scramble out whatever ranks that you feel like you'd rather have at that point. There's an intermediate class you'd rather have, even if you'd rather have, I don't know, Pegasus, because you want her to fly during some point. It's not that hard to, in the next 3 levels, scramble out Sea Lance's deflying. It's really not that hard. It's a very small amount of weapon rank. Remember, even if you fail to do it, the consequence is you have Swordmaster, who has Sword Fair, who has +2 strength, who has +4 speed, who has Sword Crit 10. What a disaster. You have Swordmaster at level 10. Like, come on, who cares? Yeah, sure, her only boons are sword and brawling, but having no Banes means it's like pretty easy to get her into something like Wyvern. Whatever it is that you want her to do in advanced that you think is a better idea than Swordmaster, you can do. The reason that I think she is underrated is because I think she is just that good. All of the points that are ever brought up against her are just focusing on things that don't matter. Even if it were true that her access to combat arts stinks and her brave combat arts are like non-existent, even if that were true, her stats are just good enough that she can double anyway, so why do I care? Even if it were true that her starting weapon ranks are bad, she has access to an advanced class straight away and 13 levels to fix that. Her bases are basically, if everybody else had Death Blow and Darting Blow already, then they would like match Catherine. That's basically what it is. You know, people talk about how important it is to get all these skills, to get the Death Blow, to get the Darting Blow, whatever. She just has those stats all the time. There is, in my opinion, one good piece of criticism against her, and that is that she's not available for Chapter 2. That's it. Or she's not available for Chapter 2 and Chapter 3. And like,
she's not around for like 3 chapters, and that's it. That's the only negative thing.
That's it.
Well, the most meta argument I could argue right now is that she's so good that she can't possibly be underrated. Like, there's no way anybody could underrate her because she's that fantastic. The first one you said was base stats. I can't argue that. You've proven that beyond a doubt. Like, her base stats are just phenomenal. There's no way to argue that. So, 3 Houses is a game that's heavily dependent on gambits. The gambits are kind of important for you to lock down enemy units or lock down formations so you can move up and kind of like control space. Catherine's charm is not that strong. Like, it's actually, it's not really a good point for her at all. There's nothing that really boots her authority at all. She does come with D, I think. It locks you out of some of the more aggressive combat ones that could be really well used, or some of the most busted ones that grant more stats later on. And so the gambit portion of it, I think she's lacking a little bit in the gambit portion, which is a very integral part. That's why Dimitri's so strong, right? Because he has access to Battalion Wrath Vantage. And as a matter of fact, her own skill is like if you don't have a battalion. So later on in the game, when battalions become way more important, and because you have to control with higher density of enemy units, you don't have that option in Catherine. What you have is like basically a player phase nuke. But I will add, this comes to my second point. She's a player phase nuke, but it's really only a one range player phase nuke. You can try to sell me on the bow idea, but I've never seen anybody try to do bow Catherine.
To be clear on my point, I was saying that Sniper Catherine specifically is not good, because I think that Sniper Catherine is play into the parts of her which are weak and is ignoring the parts of her which are strong.
Catherine doesn't really have a good 1-2 range option. Like it's pretty much, it's a very good tool, but it's one tool for one thing only. And albeit she does carry in the first half of the game, you could argue that later on with the stat inflation and speed starting to become a problem, because some units you just cannot double. Like they have too much speed. It's very difficult to double. Like you can do it, but it's hard.
Okay.
I will say that Thunderbrand alleviates that a lot. I will say that it does. I don't know if this is personal opinion, but I feel like Thunderbrand just has an inconsistency about it for some reason. I don't know if it's just the hit from Thunderbrand is really low, but her 13 starting dex is also not, it's not low, but it's, I feel like it doesn't offset the hit rate of Thunderbrand, so you actually might be led to believe, hey, I can delete everything with Thunderbrand, when actually, you're probably going to miss a lot of those hits. Like, I clearly remember the first chapter with the forest people, and her quadding and just missing everything. I'm like,
yeah, part of it is she didn't bring prowess to that fight. I'm like, girl, what are you doing? Like, you don't have prowess.
Also, I usually put her into Falconite. I think she's actually better in Falconite because she still has access to the Thunderbrand. She has basically everything she needs, plus she can get alert stance and stuff like that. So you can kind of emulate a dodge tank if you really wanted to. But I feel like her dodginess is kind of inconsistent. Like, she's definitely not around the likes of Ingrid or Petra for dodging. So I guess a lot of it is like, how hard is the beginning of the game versus the end of the game when you have more specialized units? Like, right?
Right.
Like you said, a lot of people say, hey, but she's not really good at endgame. I kind of see where they're coming from, but I still think they're underrating her capability. But you need to plan that. You can't just be like flip-flopping around. You have to kind of choose a goal with Catherine and decide on it. And that has to be what you have to do. But I don't really think that there's anything else I could tackle on that. Like, this is me trying to be really nitpicking at stuff. Really me being like, I don't like the dot on this eye, you know?
Yeah, I will say, actually, one thing that I did overlook, and I think is a legitimate criticism against her, is the charm stat. You are right when you said her base charm is bad, her charm growth is bad, her charm is just bad outright. Yeah. In this point, I do think, frankly, that I have to agree with you. A lot of it does come down to battalion choice. At the very top end, stuff like, Keyhole Wyvern or King of Lions is giving you plus 10 charm. If you've put that battalion on and the plus 10 charm isn't enough, right? You've run out of gas.
Yeah, pretty much.
And I think, like, if this is a solution that I'm proposing to fixing her bad charm stat, I think it's actually far easier to just find a way to make sure she doesn't get gambited. I mean, it's the best option the enemies have against her, so I applaud you for finding that angle as well, right?
Hey, man, gotta be a good tactician, know what I mean?
Yeah, true. I think you did bring up her personal, saying the battalions. I think, like, for by and large, her personal is just like total bait. It helps in the arena minigame, that one?
Yeah, that's true.
Like, they have or the tournaments. Yeah, the tournaments. It's very funny.
She takes less 5 damage. That's so true. I never thought of that.
Sometimes it feels unfair, and it was like house versus house sword tournament, and you're up against like Marianne, and you have like Thunderstrike Cassandra. It's like, is this really fair? It feels so unfair. To answer your point about the specialization, I don't think it's that hard for her to get range combat. She can pick up a bow, and she's gonna be better than the other people with bows. I do think there is an avenue where you just frankly outstat the enemies, right? I don't actually think the enemy stats in 3 houses are really that high, and if you look at the enemy stats and you say, I'm going to beat this, and which unit is the best for beating these stats, Catherine is almost always like the most ideal starting point, because her stats just start so high, they end up very high, that she ends up being kind of the naturally easiest option.
I think the most underrated unit in the game, and this is going to be funny because I made a whole video about how like I hate growth units, is actually Cyril.
Cyril, really?
Yes, and
so why him?
I've been on this vengeful crusade against growth units just for so long that I didn't understand really how Cyril can contribute and his abilities that he has and how quickly he has access to those abilities. The problem I usually had with Cyril was I would take one look at his base stats and be like, I'm out. I'm not doing this. Like, right? I'm not doing this. Kid. Like, why would I even do this and whatever? But the truth is, the faster you recruit Cyril, the better he's going to be. It's just his growths really can snowball him, and it's the first case of a growth unit in the game that actually matters. Because, let's be honest, in 3 houses, since you can't replace them as often, the individual units have more value. Like, right, if you were to do an Iron Man and somebody dies halfway through, it's going to be bad, because you lost so much investment because of the monastery mechanic and all this. So actually putting effort into Cyril is a payoff. But besides him snowballing, right, I think where he really, really has gas, he has access to one of the best combat arts in the game. Some people will say Vengeance, and I think Vengeance is probably one of the best one in the game. But I think his real selling point is Point Blank Volley. Like, just think about Leonie. Leonie is as good as she is because she has great stats and Point Blank Volley. But Point Blank Volley is basically a brave weapon and a part of the game that it doesn't matter if you don't have enough speed. When you think about a brave weapon, 99% of the time, it's going to be like, well, this is one of the best weapons in the game. You prevent the enemy from being able to counterattack you. You defeat stat inflation because you increase your output doubling, even if it's an unnatural double. So imagine taking every bow in the game, and bows are pretty good in 3 houses, especially the low base bows, and you're going to be using them a lot more on maddening to chip. But now you have a brave weapon. How did I not see this? How have I been ignoring Cyril for this long? Then you add on top the fact that the guy is basically built to go into the best class in the game, which is Wyvern Lord. Best physical combat class, right? In my opinion. He has fantastic strength. He's going to specialize in such a way. What's the sacrifice you're going to bench? Maybe, well, the dude already leaves in Blue Lions, so you can go ahead and slot him there if you wanted to, really. Like,
yeah, easy.
Yeah, it was like an easy swap. I think it's the potential. His unlimited potential is really seen in this game as opposed to being seen in other growth units. So maybe I'm overhyping it because I think this is the first growth unit that actually felt like a good payoff. Like, you know what I mean?
The first villager.
Yeah, like an actual villager that mattered, that made a difference. Bows, axes, and lances, all boons that he has too. So the best combat weapons in the game. His bases are pretty bad, but it really comes down to how quick can you get Point Blank Volley, and it's a no-brainer. Like, it's not that difficult to get it, especially at C+.
You can always get it. I do know any chapter you get him, probably have to get him full motivation the week you recruit, but come on, just like give him a lost item or something, right?
Pretty decent bulk. He has a fantastic HP growth. So, as we know, HP with speed means that every point of HP is worth more if you don't get doubled, because it translates to defensive resistance. So, and it's not like he has terrible resistance. He's probably it's pretty bad, but it's not like the worst. He could even probably slap a pure water on him, give him 7 more. He could probably enemy face some mages. Like, he has a good enemy face potential too on certain maps. He has more versatility. I feel like he is underrated because people like me take one look at his base stats and go like, that's it, I'm done. I'm not dealing with this. I'm not putting in the effort. When actually the payoff is really high compared to the minimal effort that you have of just giving him Point Blank Volley.
It's actually like quite insane how fast he can come online. And I do really prefer when someone's like able to start fighting straight away. And I do think that's Cyril. I do think one of the things that you brought up in his favor were his growths, kind of marking him as the villager archetype, the guy with the aptitude skill. I think very commonly what's brought up against this idea is that his growths without it are actually so poor that what aptitude does is it just brings him up to the level that everyone else is at already. And there is an element of truth to that. I have added up the growths, and with aptitude, Cyril does indeed have the highest growth total by a bit. It's 10 percentage points above Edelgard. It's like 20 percentage points above Dimitri. If you look at the offensive growth spread, it's pretty similar to units like Hilda, Petra, and Ingrid. It's about in that realm. It's like how much better are his growths really? They're a bit better, but his bases are still low enough that it's probably going to be about the advanced class bases anyway, which is not a detraction against him. It's just a detraction against this particular quality of his growths. I don't think his growths are that much better than other units. They are better.
This is the problem with growth units, right? Like, even then, it's a random chance of maybe it occurring, and that's never going to be better
than just having
the stat. And this is the biggest argument for growth units, and I agree.
And here's the thing, right? Like if I'm saying like, oh, it doesn't matter because the people are getting to advanced class bases anyway. Well, if Cyril's getting to advanced class bases anyway, and all these other people whom are brought up are also just getting to advanced class bases anyway, then like actually how bad is it? Like at that point, everyone's at advanced class bases, and Cyril does have the growths, right? So he can catch up from that point. I don't necessarily think the growths are actually his most important quality. The unit in Fire Emblem that I actually compare Cyril to the most often is like a captured Fates generic.
That's funny.
No, I'm serious.
It's true. No, because it's true.
It's true.
I see where you're gonna go with this. Yeah.
Because what do they have? Usually they have like very quick access to good weapon ranks, and sometimes like very quick access to skills. In the same way, you can recruit Cyril, and that gives you a point blank volley way earlier than you would normally have it, or that gives you a monster breaker way earlier than you would normally have it, which by the way is a very good art that he has that I think you overlooked. It's like +9 might on an axe, so it's bigger than Tempest Lance on a bigger weapon. That's really where his strengths lie. I think you did correctly evaluate his fast access to combat arts and his ability to employ them straight away. It's actually quite crazy. If you recruit Cyril in like chapter 5 or chapter 6, you immediately start him to Brigand, you give him a max level Saros Mercenaries, and you teach him point blank volley with Steel Bow Plus. He basically one-shots like everybody. Out of those two, when you said you really like the fast access to combat arts and you really like the high growths, I think you were very legit in evaluating his fast access to combat arts as being a strength of his, because that is truly a strength. But I think his growths they're just not really there. The last thing you brought up were his boons and how his boons allowed him to get into like basically whatever class he desired. This one I pretty much well agree with. I think he does have Wyvern Rider boons, so that's already amazing. He does have boons going into a lot of different weapon types that give him a lot of good arts between Vengeance, between Point Blank Volley, between Monster Breaker. He's able to get all of these things. He does start with a pretty low authority rank, which gives you sort of another hole to dig your way out of before he's really activated. But it's only 100 weapon ranks, so like just fix it, right? Just do something about it.
And like we said, the earlier you get him.
His starting rank in the axe and bow is pretty good. I really do miss how he doesn't have any starting rank in lances, because I do really like Vengeance. I think it is like...
It feels like if you wanted to go the Bow Knight route, that's where it would truly shine, because like you could try to go into horses and then Bow Knight and then try to pick up lances or whatever. But I do think that having the E rank is kind of in his detriment. If he had at least a C.
One thing that you did not bring up that I think is a reason to not be fully enamored with Cyril, his entire kit is very offensive, player phase combat art focused. He doesn't really have the stats or the access to skills needed to really excel in just sort of basic or multi-phase combat, right? For example, say you have like, I don't know, Wyvern or Paladin Cyril doing Vengeance stuff. It's good, but at the end of the day, like after you Vengeance somebody, if there's anybody left remaining, then you either need additional units or you need to retreat with Cyril. He doesn't have a huge surplus of stats. He doesn't have access to either of Battalion Wrath or Battalion Vantage. And it's not like Vantage Wrath is the only way you can fight. I do think that is pretty much the only avenue of attack which he has access to. It's much harder for him to kind of activate a build that can just kind of go ye forth and kill enemies yonder. Yeah. And that's the primary criticism I have against him as a unit.
I do agree that he can't, for example, do what Catherine could do. Like, right, you can put Catherine to mow people down without having access to any of that. Like you said, and you very much pointed out, the physical combat that Catherine has, even without combat arts, is something that is in her favor. But Cyril doesn't have that.
And by the way, to be fair, this is not a Catherine is better than Cyril argument, right? I'm not going at it from that angle. This is just in your evaluation of Cyril, I think you have actually overrated him in this aspect. I do think he's pretty underrated, because I think people look at him and see the bases and are just immediately turned off, right? They see another Donald and they're like, this is impossible. I'm not going to work with another Donald. And they lose out on this just gold mine of utility and abilities and, player phase offense that was right there. It was right there, but they just chose to not get it. So I do agree that he's underrated in that aspect.
Okay, so for that, I think we're going to end here on our criminally underrated episode for Three Houses today. You guys tell us, what do you think? Do you think it's Cyril? Do you think it's Catherine?
Do you think we're both crazy and it's a third unit?
Maybe it's Ignatz. I'm not gonna lie. I was thinking about Ignatz.
You were gonna do
this
Ignatz?
close. I was this close.
If that was your second choice, my second choice was gonna be Manuela. To be honest.
Ooh, yes, that. Ooh,
that was gonna be
do
that.
A whole video on that.
On Manuela. See, I think she's good, but I think in recent years people have figured out that she's good. If this was like 2 years ago, yeah, Manuela would have been my choice because everyone was like dumpster, trash, awful unit. But nowadays people are like, yeah, she's really good.
Yeah.
So.
Thank you guys so much for watching. Thank you, Raisins, once again for being here and for having this wonderful discussion.
Oh, it's a joy to be on the show, Axomm. Thanks for having me on. And we'll see you all later.